This engineer rolls up in a stretch limousine, gets out, like hard helmet, got his boots. He's, old gray beard. And he was like, yeah, the taxi stand was kind of far down. So I got, I hired this guy to come in. And I lost the next phase. I lost like a multi-million-dollar deal.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Matthews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
It's 30 minutes away. I'll be there in 10.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie!
You son of a bitch, wearing a long sleeve shirt on a 92-degree day. You're really going for it.
No doubt. I might have to go jerseys off by the end of this. Getting a little sweaty, getting a little hot. We're gonna hit a record in Virginia. Record temp tomorrow. Might hit 94.
You might blame the long sleeve shirt for the skin cancer you get because you take your shirt off later today. It might be because of that. I think might be blaming the wrong thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's exactly right. It's baseball season, Frankie. How's your Red Sox doing?
They're really good when their starting pitching is good, and they're terrible when they're not. They're kind of like the Mighty Muscles, Max's team. Not very good.
Mighty Muscles with that badass catcher. Max Cava, I see. Does he like it back there? Is he like playing back catcher with the gear on?
He sets up on the fence because he's afraid of the ball.
That'll change. That's it. Kudos to him. I bet half your kids won't put that gear on and stand back there anyway.
Nobody wanted to do it. Now everybody wants to do it. It's the hottest. The pitcher used to be the hottest position on the field. Now it's catcher.
Yeah. That's how it goes. No one wants to do it at first, and then everyone's fighting for it because they see a couple kids come off smiling, and it's fun. That's my favorite position to watch as catcher. That's awesome.
I love it.
So, Frankie, the topic we're going to be talking about today is, as a manager, as a coach, how do you get someone who is fixated on something outside of their control, focused with a growth mindset, focused on those things that are within their control? And I see this often with even top performers that used to perform really well and now they're struggling a little bit. They start to point fingers at the market or other departments, or oftentimes they'll blame the last thing that happened that kept them from making a bonus or making money. They're looking at that last sale that fell apart where a manager wouldn't give them that last discount. And then they're saying, well, that cost me a bonus. And, they're focused on the last day of a 90-day quarter. And then that drags into the second quarter. Or they're focused on the leads aren't great and the marketing department screwed something up last quarter. And the more they start to ruminate and focus on that stuff, their manager knows that some of that's true. And so they want to be empathetic and they want to listen and not be rude. But the more of that they do, the less focus that person becomes on what's in their control to go fix the very problems they have. And I've been blessed to work for two companies with some pretty hard-ass managers that when I started to ruminate and point fingers outside of my control, were really good at bringing me back to reality and pointing fingers back at me and saying, okay, are you doing everything you can do before you're whining to me? And you worked for one of those companies as well. And I think some of the executives that were really good at this. And I think it's going to be a fun conversation today. We're going to mix in sports as always, and how we have a tendency to remember the last play of a big loss without remembering all the other plays that led up to that big screw up. But I'll just open it up to you a little bit, because the first one we're going to talk about on these sports examples is the legendary 1986 Boston Red Sox gaffe with Bill Buckner. Frankie, where were you when you saw the ground ball from Mookie Wilson skirt through the legs of Bill Buckner?
I remember exactly where I was. I was in the living room with my dad. like the TV room that we had as kids. And back then we used to have like little pillows. We'd lay on our stomachs. My dad was on the couch. My brother and I were both on the floor, and we were like banging the floor the whole time, just watching that game. And then I literally remember the ball rolling through Buckner's legs.
I can imagine Sheriff had some choice words. The old man probably wasn't too happy.
He would get more pissed off with the Dolphins than he did the Red Sox. He wasn't as big of a Red Sox fan. My granddad ultimately was in his later life, but big of a Red Sox fan. But he was pissed. He wanted him to win. But he would get more animated for Dolphin screw ups.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know what we're talking about, the play that I'm talking about is in the 1986 World Series. And it is a routine ground ball, and I'm going to share it here. Routine ground ball from the New York Mets that all the first baseman has to do is catch the ball and go step on first base. So we're going to play it here.
Little roller up along first. Behind the bag. It gets for Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Mets win it.
That's enough.
I just wanted you to have to watch. I just wanted you to have to watch that longer. You know what I love about old school announcers is they don't feel the need to talk. They just pan to the crowd going absolutely ape shit. So if you're just listening to this, it is the easiest ground ball you've ever seen. This ball is not going more than 40 miles an hour, and it's a big hop. Everything about it is uniquely playable by anyone on Frank's Little League baseball team. And that gaffe cost the Red Sox Game 6. Interesting enough, that wasn't the last game of the World Series, but everyone remembers Bill Buckner, and he is the GOAT. He is the GOAT of a 7-game series. They played 64 innings in that series, but all anyone remembers is that play, and he was the GOAT for a long time. But that's recency bias. That is what we tend to want to affix blame when things don't go our way, when we don't win, when our team doesn't win. We want to simplify it. In psychology, this is called a heuristic, Frankie. A heuristic is just a shortcut that your brain makes to ease the pain. You want to be able to simply define something. You want to be able to blame something, point it. But what's interesting is we started looking at this game, and Frank and I did some half-ass internet research. And one thing that I learned that I didn't know, the guy who was supposed to come in, the Red Sox had Roger Clemens on the mound, who at the time was the best pitcher in baseball. He had a lead. One, they pulled him early. Roger Clemens had plenty in the tank. Later on, Roger said, I don't know why I was pulled. I could have played. They pulled him. And what they were hoping to have in place of Roger Clemens at the time was a pitcher by the name of Oil Can Boyd. Oil Can Boyd had a monster year as a pitcher and should have been coming in out of the bullpen to relieve the 8th inning. But Oil Can Boyd had been told, you're going to be a reliever today and Game 7. We need you for long relief. He got pissed, stormed out of the stadium, went home and got hammered. So Oil Can Boyd was sitting on a hotel bed drinking at the time he was supposed to be coming out in the 8th inning. And the guy who came in instead of him was a guy by the name of Schiraldi, who blew the lead. And then it ended up being a tie game going into the 10th inning when you saw Bill Buckner make that error.
Unlike Lou Brown bringing Ricky Wild Thing Vaughn in for relief against the Yankees, it just didn't work out the same way.
The wild thing.
So there's a few things to look at with this. Bill Buckner was born in 1949. He was almost 40 years old when this play happened. He had terrible knees. He was in really bad shape. But there was 5 or 6 really important plays besides the fact that Oil Can Boyd was drunk and probably also hopped up on coke, which is left out of the story. But those things being said, there was a few other plays that could have easily gotten the game to end, like before the ball ever rolled through his legs. So if you remember, in 1986, it had been about 60 years since the Red Sox had won a World Series, and there was what was called the curse of the Bambino. And the Red Sox traded in 1919 to the New York Yankees, Babe Ruth, the best player that's ever lived until Shohei Ohtani. So there was this mental stigma with the Red Sox that they can't win. And what ultimately became is a self-fulfilling prophecy of they didn't win. And they didn't go, it was 1986 all the way to 2004. It's 18 more years before they finally won a World Series. And this kind of learned helplessness or this mindset that we're just not good enough to do this as an organization, it kind of haunts you. It can haunt you as a business. It can haunt you as a department within a business. It's many of the things that start to come about. We're going to use another story in a minute about a franchise that's never won the big game. And they blame one particular thing, or it's a series of little things that typically are the lead up. So you like to use heuristics and psychology. I'll use an incredibly diverse psychological theory. It's called going from 0 to 1. And going from 0 to 1 is taking care of the next thing. It's not taking care of the thing at the very end. It's like, what is the next thing we can do in this process? If something's going wrong, stop, decompose why it's going wrong, and then say, okay, what's one thing we can do to get momentum? If you've ever gone on a diet, you have a bad meal. Okay, well, don't have a second bad meal. If you're trying to get fit, you don't miss 2 workouts in a row. 0 to 1, little things. The Red Sox made a mistake. 3 or 4 mistakes later turned into this gaffe that ultimately put them in Game 7 where they lost and didn't win a World Series for another 19 years.
It's almost never just the thing you're pointing at when you're not getting the results that you want. It's easy to blame a marketing campaign. It's easy to blame the engineering team because they haven't quite figured out the issues you got with your product. It's easy to blame that we've had some turnover in our corporate staff. It's easy. There's lots of things that you can always point to. And the truth is, those things are contributing to you not performing as well as you could. That's true. But if that's all you're focused on, you're not going from 0 to 1. You're stuck at 0. You're stuck in the rearview mirror pointing fingers at things and not focused on, okay, when I wake up tomorrow and come to the office, what's the first thing I can do that prevents me from losing the next game 6? What can I can't control that. That game is over. That whole series is over. The Red Sox went on to win multiple championships, but it took years because you're right. They were mired in this, well, we're doomed. We're just not cut out. The curse of the Bambino, all this bullshit. They just were stuck in this cultural morass instead of focusing on what the hell do we need to do next? What do we need to do next? And for the sports fans out there, we're not going to just show you baseball. Frank is starting to talk about football, and he was talking about a team that's never really won the big one. And it all started with the Super Bowl in 1991.
Before you get to the Super Bowl 91, I want to say something real quick. I want to say 2 things. First, the Red Sox were in the World Series in 1986. The ball went through that guy's leg. That defined them. They did not make it back to a World Series again until 2004, the year they ultimately won, 18 years later. So the organization bottomed out. Every single person that was there turned over. Like it went from one of the preeminent franchises in the world to a place where they were bottom feeders. They literally had multiple seasons where they were the worst team in baseball after that period because they just fell apart. They lost their way. It reminds me of something we're probably not going to talk about, but the 1980 Olympic hockey team. The opposite happened. Instead of being defined by beating the Russians, that was the game for the bronze medal. That wasn't the gold medal game. What their coach did is he pulled them in instead of allowing them to get too high on this moment of just beating a team that nobody thought could be beaten. And 2 weeks before literally several days before the Olympics started, 2 weeks before they beat them, they lost 10-3 in Madison Square Garden against the same team. Nobody thought the U.S. kids were going to win, but go 0-1. What the coach told them is, if you lose this next game, you'll take it to your fucking graves. And he said, fucking graves. And he turned around and walked out, and he curses a lot less than I do. He never cursed in front of his players. And the reason he said it at that moment is he needed them to very quickly get over this moment, even though it was on the opposite end. It was a high. End the high and go on to the next thing. We'll deal with the high later, because if you don't, you're going to have an enormous low. So it comes down to putting a tourniquet on something very quickly and stopping the bleeding, which in a lot of these situations doesn't happen.
So awesome interjection there. And I don't mean to sound surprised. You are the best color man in the business, by the way. The interesting thing about what you just said is we can ruminate on the negative, and we can also ruminate on the positive.
That's right.
Stuck in living in, oh man, look how great we are. Look what we did. And you lose the gold medal game. No one will give a shit. We wouldn't be talking about the miracle on ice was the bronze medal game. We wouldn't care. Americans don't care about the bronze winner. We wouldn't care that we beat the Russians. The only reason that story mattered is they went on to win the next game. But you can get stuck in the rearview mirror, both on your past success and also failures or things outside of your control.
The 2026 Olympic hockey game would have been one of our best performances ever, our second best performance ever if we had won silver, right? But nobody would have given a damn that Jack Hughes' teeth got knocked out and we lost that game. Didn't matter.
No one cared.
We wouldn't have talked about it.
No one cares. So in 1991, the Buffalo Bills had just a stacked team filled with Hall of Famers. They were loaded. They were big favorites going into the Super Bowl, and they were big favorites because they were playing a Giants team that largely didn't have a passing game. It had an elite defense with some elite defensive players, but they had a backup quarterback starting, guy by the name of Hostetler, who never really did anything in the regular season outside of this one playoff series. They were missing Phil Simms, who was an all-pro quarterback. And so largely most people thought the Bills were going to steamroll because they had done that all throughout the playoffs and throughout the regular season. And this game is very much, aside from Whitney Houston singing a wonderful rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner, it is largely known for the last play of the game, and I'm going to go ahead and play that last play of the game here.
It is a 47-yard try by Scott Norwood to try to win the game for Buffalo. Lindner will snap it. Wright will hold it. Norwood will kick it from the right hash mark with 8 seconds left, and the Giants leading Buffalo 20-19. It's a 47-yard kick for the Bills. Norwood assumes the position. Lindner waits to snap it. We wait. There's a snap. There's a kick. It is up. It is no good. Norwood missed. 4 seconds left. The Giants have won Super Bowl 25 by the score of 20-19.
My God, that's still heartbreaking. 47 yards, not an easy kick, first off. Still not an easy kick, even with as good as how everyone else is today kicking. But did you know in this game, Frankie, that there were many plays that the Bills blew leading up to that? It should have never come down to a kick. In the first place, the Giants had a backup quarterback, and the Bills continued to run their base defense, which was largely a big nickel. A big nickel is meant to stop a passing game. And that played right into the only thing the Giants had, which was Otis Anderson, big, strong-ass running back. They ran him 39 times for close to 200 yards. They didn't make Hostetler pass. They didn't make him throw. They didn't put them into their control. They had a play earlier in the game. They had a 10-point lead, first off, that they blew in the second half. The defense did. But one of the plays in this game when they had a big lead, they had a 3rd and 13, the Giants, and the Bills missed 5 tackles on a little short out where the Giants were basically about to punt. And Mark Ingram made 5 guys miss, got this in all pros missing tackles on this play. They had the Belichick ran a defense called an umbrella defense, which is basically like a dime defense where you just to kind of take away the passing game. And the Bills continued to run the K gun, which was just throw the ball left and right. Even though against Belichick's defense, the Bills had Thurman Thomas, who's a Hall of Fame running back. He averaged 9 yards per carry, but they didn't give him many. They threw the ball 30 times. So if you go back and you look at that whole game, the coaches blew it, the quarterback blew it, the defense blew it, but all anyone talks about is our kicker missed a kick at the end. Interesting enough, it's a 47-yard kick. There was 35 seconds left on the clock when they got the last play before that kick, and the Bills ran all that time off. They didn't try to get another 10 yards. They didn't try to get a little bit closer and make it a 37-yard kick, 40-yard kick, 35-yard kick. They just ran the clock off even though they had 2 downs left to play. So if you want to go back and point a lot of fingers, that whole team lost that game. And I think when you listen to the Bills get interviewed from that team, I never hear anyone say Norwood blew the game. They all actually are pretty good at accepting of the fact that there were other things we could have done. But fans most definitely blamed Norwood and ruminated on it. And the Bills still haven't won a Super Bowl till today.
So the Bills went to the Super Bowl in 91, 92, 93, 94, and this clip is from 91. They had the ability to win. They should have won. They probably should have won this game. But they have not won a Super Bowl since, and I don't believe they've been back to a Super Bowl since the 90s. And similar to the Red Sox when the Red Sox bottomed out, I believe this is cultural. I believe this is something that is just learned kind of helplessness within the Bills organization, kind of like the Red Sox with the curse of the Bambino. So with the 1991 team, it was the second Super Bowl that Bill Parcells had won as a head coach. And importantly, it was the second Super Bowl that a guy who was just a defensive coordinator back then named Bill Belichick had won. But there's a podcast that's out now that's called Games with Names, hosted by a guy by the name of Julian Edelman. And Julian Edelman is not going to be a Hall of Famer. He's a Patriot Hall of Famer, but not an NFL Hall of Famer. A good player who was a 10-plus year player for the Patriots. And they talked about like partying at a Super Bowl. And according to what Edelman says is that there was no way to party at a Super Bowl. It was a business trip. It was handled like a business trip, and it was from the top down because it was learned by Belichick when he worked for Parcells. And the Giants took the game more seriously. Cornelius Bennett, who's a famous player for the Bills, said several players, they admitted that the Bills didn't take the Giants seriously because they actually were out partying quite a bit in Tampa and having a great time because they thought they were going to beat the crap out of the Giants because the Giants were underdogs. They let it go to their head. 2 years later, the Cowboys beat the favored Bills 52-17 because culturally they didn't do the right stuff. And because of that, these little things add up. And you start to get into a losing mentality, a losing culture, and you just don't think you can break out of the slump. Even though they made it to the game, they didn't think they could win the game because they didn't have the fundamentals built around it.
Love that. We're going to do one last sports example. And this is going to probably be the most famous, for people of our age at least, most famous last-minute gaffe in an NCAA basketball tournament. We just finished March Madness. This is one of the most famous championship games ever, and it's sort of the most infamous the way it ended. It also broke my heart. I lived in Michigan at the time, and this was 1993, and I was a big Fab Five fan of the 5 freshmen that all started. This was their sophomore year, and they were the favorites in this championship game, and they had a nice lead leading up to this, and this is the final minute of this game.
Two to tie. Michigan would have to bring it.
Oh, he walked and the referee missed it.
Weber brings it into the front court. They have no timeouts remaining.
He causes too many timeouts. That's a technical foul.
He called a timeout. Michigan doesn't have any.
He got by with a walk, and Jimmy calls a he calls a timeout. He doesn't realize that's Michigan's too many, and so it'll be a technical foul. North Carolina shooting and the ball. A huge mental mistake.
So more than huge, that end of the game, North Carolina kept the ball from there. They hit a couple of shots. It was impossible to get anything else. And Weber, even though he had a Hall of Fame NBA career, is still kind of known for the timeout that he called. But in that game, Michigan had a late 6-point lead. And with 4.5 minutes remaining, they basically gave up a 9-0 late game run. And in that time, Jalen Rose had his worst game of the season. He had 6 turnovers in that game, 3 of them late. Bad turnovers, giving the ball up that just protect the ball and they win that game. No one talks about Jalen Rose's performance. Chris Webber made those turnovers. That would have been the story of the game, his turnovers. But because of what happened with Webber, and also there's a lot that falls on the coach. Chris Webber is a power forward.
Why the hell is he dribbling?
They had just called a timeout before that free throw that was missed. And they had just laid out. They were running their offense, but they didn't say what happens when Weber gets the ball. Get the ball to Jalen Rose, get it to the point guard, set it up. Weber just took off. So there's a lot going on with coaching. There's also a lot of conversation. If you go look at the replay, half of the guys on the bench and a couple of coaches are making timeout, yelling timeout and doing this to Weber. Some of the coaches knew, some of the players knew, but there were confusing messages coming from the bench as well. So another game where you can pick on Weber, and of course he made a really bad decision at a bad time, but a lot of series events had to happen just for Michigan to have blown the lead that you could point to a lot of different people who had a hand in the loss in that game.
So there's a few things that I will go into with this because Ian covered most of it. I don't think the referees wanted to penalize Weber because he was such a likable guy, and I think they were trying to work with him. The first thing he did was call timeout under the basket, and nobody recognized it. So as soon as he got the rebound, if you see the clip, he actually calls timeout, not as aggressively, but they kind of ignored it. Then he travels because he's not a point guard, and they didn't call either of those two things.
An egregious travel.
Like 100%, like that gets called in youth basketball by someone who's like blind. So point of the matter is, like, those two things should have ended the game, and it would have been a different outcome because those are kind of in the moment type of a thing. But then he dribbles the whole length of the court, which belabors the point, and he calls the timeout. So, like, let's take that. That happens at the beginning of April in 1993. 8 weeks later, Chris Webber is drafted number 1 overall in the NBA draft. He ultimately gets traded immediately after being drafted, and he plays in Golden State, which is kind of a forgotten about franchise. He's a 5-time All-Star, and he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Now, he has got a tractor trailer load of stuff he's pulling behind him with problems, scandals, other things. But he was so good on a crap franchise that he literally got elected to the Hall of Fame very, very quickly. He was on the famous team that the Shaq Kobe Lakers beat when he was on the Sacramento Kings. He had an incredible career. And you'll still see Chris Webber today because he's incredibly charismatic and he was a cultural phenomenon. He's an announcer. But the two things that I like the best about this, number one, he said from a mental health and growth standpoint, Webber described the aftermath as straight despair, but also a turning point that taught him how to face failure. Chris Webber has multiple children. Webber has stated that he shows his children the timeout game to demonstrate how to handle and recover from one's worst moments. It's not the moments that we fail. It's what we do with those moments that make us.
I love that.
It's incredible, right? So that's the best part of that story to me. He didn't hide from it. He showed it to his kids. His kids understand Dad is great. He's our dad. But he screwed up because he's human like the rest of us. But he became a Hall of Famer. He's probably worth a couple of $100 million. He's done very well financially. He's become a 20-year broadcaster. Like, you don't do that. That's because you're liked. You got to be really good at that craft. That's a very different craft. So to kind of culminate all of this, he took what could have been a low point and allowed it to be the wind at his sails that propelled him forward, not someone that stifled him.
Do you know the name of his charity organization?
I don't.
Timeout.
That's great.
right? He just owned it. He
it.
owned it. He moved on.
It is who I
And,
am.
you know, went on to have a great career, and he's a great dad, and he's kind of moved on a little bit. I think the point that we are trying to hammer home is if you are a manager or you're a performer and you're fixated on a mistake, whether you made it or another department made it, something holding you back, there are always 10 things that you could go find that are in your control. In all of those games, we could go show you 10 other mistakes, 10 things that were in their control leading up to the bad play that everyone still talks about. There's it's the old, when you point a finger out, there's always 4 pointing right back at you in a fist. And I think as a manager, yes, be empathetic. If something happened outside their control, if a storm happened that kept them from getting a sale that would have given them a bonus, I'm empathetic to you, man. That really sucks. That's bad timing. But you also have to point to the other 89 days in the quarter. And where were you there? What are all the other things that were within your control that you didn't make happen? And you have to get people thinking that way, because if they are so focused on the unfair things, the things outside of their control, they're not going to be putting in the same effort, the same work ethic, because they're stuck in a victim. The world is out to get me. This isn't fair. All of that time spent ruminating about the missed kick, the timeout, the ground ball under their legs, isn't time spent focused on the tangible steps I've got to take to go make it right in the next game.
One of the things that I struggled with when I was younger is this is going to be kind of out there a little bit, but I think it's actually a really good point, and I'm going to use it. So my wife grew up with a bedtime, and my wife grew up as someone who always got up early in the morning and did things. Her parents, her mom had the night shift. Her dad is a farmer, essentially. And getting up early is part and parcel of being a farmer. Like, you were in bed, lights out, and we're going to bed early so I can get up early the next day and do my work. In my household, I was somebody that always went to bed late, and I woke up late. And as a younger person, I always felt like I was behind because my day started so much later. Like, I was always kind of envious of people who got up early and got all their work done and were drinking beer by noon. Because me, I wasn't drinking a beer at noon. I was doing all the work I had to do throughout the course of the day because my day didn't start till 11. So what I started to do as an adult is I changed my day, where I have something that forces me out of bed and starts my day by no later than 7. And by the time I had kids, I was already in this habit, so I was ready to go. But I was never procrastinating, and I was always getting ahead of things, even though it's kind of against my nature. Why is this relevant? If you're worried about the last few days in the quarter, you've missed the first. There's 13 weeks in a quarter. You've missed the first 12. If you start strong, it gives you the momentum that allows you to put yourself in position where you get those extra 10 yards for that field goal. You get ahead of your quota. You get ahead of these types of things, and it's not always catching up and playing chase. And that's the beauty of kind of getting ahead of things and kind of changing the dynamic. That's how I did it in my personal life. So I don't feel like I'm always chasing. I always feel like I'm kind of ahead. Another stupid example is like going to the office on Sundays. For my entire career, I always spent like 4 hours in the office on Sundays because I felt like I had a head start on Monday. The week wasn't overwhelming for me because I was kind of ahead. So how do you get a few little hacks in your day, your week, your month, your quarter, your year that give you an ability to ramp? And if you do that, it changes things from you going uphill to you going downhill. And that changes everything.
At the Disney amusement parks, they have a ethos for customer service, which is, it's not my fault, but it is my problem. If you see a customer unhappy, make them happy. No one's blaming you, but you can go do something. If that customer's unhappy, you're an employee of Disney, and our mission is to make customers happy. So go do whatever's in your control to try to turn it around, try to figure it out. And they try to empower all of their employees. Even if you're just sweeping up trash or serving cotton candy, they try to empower any employee with a Disney badge on to try to make things right for a customer, even if it wasn't their fault of why they're upset. And I'm going to finish with one of the best managers I could have possibly had was one of my first managers. And he had a thing he would always say to me that would drive me frickin' nuts, which was, sounds like a sales problem. And I was always in his office and I was always complaining about something, right? We're overpriced. Look at the rates I have to charge for engineers, and they're the same guys that our competition just had 2 weeks ago, or we keep missing deliveries by the factory. I had a customer, it was Floor Construction, which is a big commercial construction company, huge construction
They used to be
company.
Floor Daniels. I know them.
Yep. And so Floor was building out all of the data centers during the .com era. And to build data centers, just like today, data centers are back in vogue. You need power plants. You need backup power. They can't go down. It costs millions of dollars to go down for seconds with some of these big places. And so GE, we would build the power infrastructure for these things. And Fluor was pissed at us. They thought we were overpriced. They thought that we under-delivered for what we charged. And they were threatening to switch the next phase, which was a multi-million-dollar order for me, the next phase from GE to Siemens, my big competitor. And I was all over our ops manager. We got to do this. We got to do this. We got to keep it. But the truth is, Frankie, this customer never liked me from the beginning. We just never jived. We didn't connect. I was young. I made some mistakes myself. I probably didn't know the business as well as he wanted me to, but I got the first phase, but sort of, I knew it was by a string. I was hanging by a string. There were 2 men on in the bottom of the 10th, like the Red Sox, and Mookie Wilson was at the plate. I had let it get to that place. So I had been complaining to my boss about a lot of the things, but we're in this phase 1 and we're in this project meeting with my customer who'd been complaining that we wasted a lot of their money and our cost overruns were too high. And we had this engineer that we were flying in to help us out. Another bone of contention with this customer. You guys don't even have the local resources and I'm having to pay for it. So anyway, we're sitting outside. Guys are smoking. It's Floor Daniels, right? Construction. And we're waiting on my engineer to come so we can kick off this meeting. This engineer rolls up in a stretch limousine. Gets out, like hard helmet, got his boots. He's, old gray beard. And he was like, yeah, the taxi stand was kind of far down. So I got, I hired this guy to come in. But it was like a visual representation of everything Fluor hated us for. That we were GE and we blew their money. And my face was red. I could have killed somebody, including this guy. But so this meeting goes over and I go right to my manager and I'm like, are you kidding me? That is the last thing that could have happened. God damn it. Like, this is going to screw me. And he looked at me and he said, it sounds like a sales problem. Did you tell this engineer how upset this customer was? Did you call him beforehand and warn him that you're in Chicago now and this is what you're walking into? Did he have any idea? Or did you just give him an address and tell him when the meeting was starting, which is what I did. And then he went back to, I know you've got a lot of clients that like you that would have probably given you a second chance had someone showed up in a limo and just given you grief and let you go cut some money off of the tab. How come this guy didn't give you that chance? And he just started asking me a bunch of pointed ass questions that he knew the answers to. He knew this guy didn't really like me. And he did as I was pointing a finger at the limo, he showed me 4 were pointing right back at me that I was failing with this Fluor account. And I lost the next phase. I lost like a multi-million-dollar deal to Siemens. And he called me in and he said, I don't want to hear one word about anyone other than you. You lost that deal. You lost that deal. And if you can't come to grips with the fact that you lost that deal, you're going to lose the next one. I'm saying this because I like you and I see you going down a really dangerous rabbit hole, Ian. You can't be a successful salesperson pointing fingers. Take some frickin' ownership and realize you're dealing with the same things that all the other sales guys are dealing with. Take ownership of your accounts or you're going to keep losing deals like this. I don't want to hear anything else. And Frankie, it's one of that shit is ingrained in me. That is 2001 when that happened. That's 25 years ago. I remember that conversation because I wanted to punch him. But I walked out, I slept on it. I woke up in the morning and I thought, God damn it, he's right. Like I gotta get on top of my shit, and I gotta quit just winging it and selling things and hoping ops takes care of everything else. I'm gonna micromanage the piss out of my customers from now on. That's what I did. And I got a lot better at sales after that moment. And so just like the Scott Norwood kick, the timeout with Weber, you can fixate on the limo, or you can focus on what the hell could I have done better and then apply it the next time.
There's two ways to learn a lesson, I think. Someone teaches it to you, but you learn it yourself. And what happens in a lot of instances is someone teaches you a lesson, like you as a parent, and then it's your job to self-assess it and fix it. The example that I use about getting up early is me feeling something and changing it about my life. What happened was you had good leadership. That good leadership gave you a chance to really learn it and take it to heart. And then you did what good employees and ultimately good managers and leaders do, is you became, it was ingrained in you. And we'll tell funny stories back and forth through text about what you'll say to your son or like what you'll do for managers. And 25 years ago, it's no longer Connor's story, it's your story. And you've used it as your story as kind of a linchpin, right? Like the Red Sox didn't build off of that moment. They got completely torn apart. What you did is you said, okay, I could use this, but I'm going to change this into my timeout moment. It's going to be something that propels me forward. And it does. You still talk about, I've never heard you tell that exact story, but you learn like, hey, I'm not going to leave anything for granted. I'm going to make sure Frank's not eating and he's not looking at his email in this podcast because I made that mistake once with a guy with a limo and I'm not going to do it again.
Frank, did you read the outline? Did it answer the question? Did you read the outline? Okay, good. We're good.
And speaking of that, I have a hard stop. So this was a great episode. Thank you for not belaboring more points and showing me my beloved Celtics losing or the Dolphins not getting back to a Super Bowl. It was good enough just to suffice it with the Bills loss, which is terrific, and one heartbreak with the Red Sox.
Frankie, what should people do if they enjoyed this episode?
Oh, you should like and subscribe, baby.
Like, subscribe, give us a 5-star comment, write some comments, and
feedback is a gift. Right, Ian? Feedback is a gift.
We can use the feedback. God knows we could use the feedback.
However, if you want to say Ian's better at this than me, we've already heard that feedback and he's not getting another co-host, so you can leave that one out.
Yes. And that was my son that probably wrote that, so that's probably the only people that think I'm better than Frank. Frankie, good to see you, homie.
Always a pleasure. Don't forget to take that shirt off, a little sunscreen on before you go on that run.